Warning, the following podcast is a shit show, and the individuals you are about to meet are idiots. Their opinions, anecdotes, and advice contain zero nutritional value. This is the critical human condition and all of its strangeness. This is life, according to an idiot.
So this is kind of like a current events episode of this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So that leads me into the UAPs, UFO, and recent disclosure that we've been seeing from the military and the government on aliens
And
flying saucers.
drones.
Drones. So to start, despite the revelations gleaned from the recent congressional hearings discussing UAPs, the United States government has not issued any official confirmation of alien life. I feel that's important to say. There's no one said anything about these even being necessarily confirmed extraterrestrial. These like things in the sky, things that we've allegedly recovered. It's just like a high potential. If this stuff is legit, it didn't come from Earth.
Okay, that's interesting because on TikTok for a while, which I'm sure you probably saw, or some people listening, is that everyone was like, the government confirmed. The government said it.
Yeah, no, it's like they would use certain key terms like what is it, like off-planet vehicle? Like there was some document or statement released by either from a hearing or from a government official that used a term like this might be an off-planet vehicle, and everyone's like, what the fuck does that mean, off-planet vehicle? So it's the first time the government has said like there might be aliens. Like we never said there weren't.
So they're not,
you know what I mean?
They're not being direct in saying that it is aliens, but they're giving like little hints and nods that it could be. Essentially, like they want to cover their ass.
Yeah, I feel like they're kind of priming the public,
right?
To be like, hey, just so you know, there might be. There's like a 20% chance or less.
Which means that
it's
probably likely.
Yeah, which means that it's still huge. Like we should get them ready because this could upend everything, and it's going to be we're going to take a long time to get our heads above water in terms of regaining the narrative, regaining control. Because like if aliens show up, if all of a sudden we have footage of an alien or footage of a UFO, that changes the conversation at like a human level.
Because like when has the government ever been in the place of like pushing down like inflammatory things like that? You know what I mean? Like I feel like they love inflammatory media in the sense of like, oh my god, this thing's happening, aliens are real, blah blah blah, whatever. Like if
because they benefit from it.
Because they benefit from it, right? So the fact that they're not sounding the alarms, but they are making it known that it's likely that it could be is weird. Because if it weren't likely, then they would just say that.
It's like when the funny person gets serious.
Exactly.
Or when the nice person gets angry. You go like, oh, that's it.
Yeah.
They don't do this normally. That's kind of weird. Yeah, the government being very like mature about how they address the potential of UFOs or they're calling them UAPs now. It makes you think, okay, so they're studying this stuff.
Yeah.
They're giving some credence to this now. So, key terms before we get into what I'm going to talk about. UAP, as we just said, stands for Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena, which is real broad. And alternatively, Unidentified Aerial Phenomena. Now, what we'll be talking about is more falls in line with aerial phenomena, but the anomalous phenomena encaptures both shit we see in the sky and also like what you're talking about, stuff that comes from the water, stuff that comes from what, you know, in between whatever crazy sightings there's been. It's a blanket term pretty much. So it describes objects in the sky that can't be identified as aircraft or natural phenomena like birds, balloons, bird-shaped balloons, stuff like that. UAPs are not synonymous with alien spaceships. Rather, it could be any airborne object that can't be immediately identified. They can appear in one or more domain, sky, sea, what's the other domains? Lava.
Mm.
I don't think there's been any lava UAPs, but hey,
Yeah, maybe there could be.
we're still early in this new season, so you know, it could be happening. So these anomalous detections, as they're called, are those are what UAPs are sometimes called. They demonstrate behaviors that are not readily understood by sensors or observers and demonstrate capabilities or material that exceed any known technical limits within which man-made aircraft may be safely operated. So there's like, hey, we don't know what these are. It ain't a plane. It ain't a bird. It ain't Superman. It's something spooky going on. And we don't. Most importantly, like we can't measure what it's doing. Like we don't. It's playing outside of our. It's not playing by our rules.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, secondly, airborne UAP. Obviously, any UAP detected between Earth's sea level and what's called the Kármán line, which I learned is the edge of the Earth's atmosphere.
Okay.
So right before Earth becomes space, there is a boundary, and it's called the Kármán line. And then obviously spaceborne UAP, that kind of you can assume. And then transmedium UAP, which is any UAP detected in transit between more than one domain, which is sea, sky, lava. This and other info was pulled directly from the Department of Defense's fiscal year 2024 consolidated annual report on unidentified anomalous phenomena.
Okay.
So there's reports on it. They're talking about
Yeah.
it. It's becoming a big deal now. So some history, as you know, but some of our listeners are not Americans. Americans have been calling for disclosure of known intel on UFOs and alien life for decades, probably starting in maybe not the 1940s and 50s, but that's when public interest grew exponentially following the introduction of like the flying saucer into public, the public conscience.
Roswell was in the 30s. Is that right?
40s. And I'm going to touch on Roswell as a primer as well. As general distrust in the government became the norm for large swaths of the country, think of like the disastrous Vietnam War, Watergate. We lost confidence in the government and in our leadership, whatever. And as early catalysts of this distrust occurred, Americans grew to feel distrust towards the government. And with distrust blooming, conspiracy theories centered around a secretive and abusive government whispered their way into existence, spreading within fringe social networks and countercultures, and eventually reaching pop culture. Now it's like popular to be like, hey, the aliens are real and the government's hiding them. That's like very mainstream now to say. And so that's where we are now with it. And for the longest time, I remember like several presidents have promised on the campaign trail, or you know, people that lost the election, they would say like, I promise that like I will disclose what we know about UFO or what's going on in Area 51 or whatever. I know Bill Clinton was pretty serious about aliens and UFOs. Him and his pal, who was like his chief of staff or something, John Podesta, I think it's his name. Anyways, they were big sci-fi geeks. And so they, and Bill Clinton talks about this, I think, in several interviews. They looked into it hardcore, like trying to figure out, like, what do we know, whatever. And he implied that even he didn't have access to that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I remember, like, Jimmy Carter was, like, another big one, too.
Yeah, because Jimmy Carter was big on transparency because he came after Nixon, which was, like, well, he came after Ford, but Ford was, after Nixon resigned, was made president. And that was an era of, like, you know, Watergate and like a lot of backstabbing and secrecy. And so his response to that was like, I'll be open about whatever.
Yeah, he apparently reported seeing a UFO in the 60s and 69. And from that 4chan account, it might have been that and it might have been something else. But because Jimmy Carter was like a very religious man, that he, like when he learned the truth, it was very upsetting. Implying that a lot of people's like religious beliefs are going to be disrupted with the knowledge of aliens.
Yeah, that's somewhere. Never mind. Yeah, that's a huge concern with like disclosure. Is like, let's say we do have proof. Would it be safe to release that information? Because there are certain people who, if their core beliefs are shaken like that, we don't know what that does to like
Their psyche.
mental health in mass. You know, and like really religious people. If the only reason you're not going around murdering and blowing up buildings is because of the threat of hell, and all of a sudden that threat goes away, or you perceive it to be gone, I don't think many people are like that. But I mean, there's people that
Maybe.
are the promise of hell really is a whatever. But yeah, there was a rumor that Carter was debriefed on. Had asked to be debriefed on what we knew about UFOs and aliens life or whatever. I don't think this is a real story, but it's a good story. It's because Carter was a very thoughtful Christian president. They said that when he had the briefing, it was behind closed doors, and when they opened, he was weeping.
And it was like very pale, and part of that story is that they haven't disclosed with presidents since then.
Yeah.
Because of his reaction to it.
And probably, as our politicians change, like our current president, there's less of a respect for the office in terms of like secrecy and not saying certain things. So like you don't want things to enter the propaganda machine, to get onto Fox News and CNN and whatever the fuck, So I think probably the seed of this specific brand of conspiracy, aside from what we talked about before with distrust and everything, but UFOs, flying saucers. I think the seed of that conspiracy was first planted in the summer of 1947 in the high plains of New Mexico on the edge of a town called Roswell. The event, simply known as the Roswell Incident, is a widely popular conspiracy theory which claims that a 1947 crash recovery of a damaged military weather balloon by the U.S. Air Force was in fact a cover-up to conceal the military's recovery of a crashed alien spacecraft. We've covered the Roswell incident in, I think we have a whole episode about it. You should check that out if you want the details. But the page turn, broad strokes are such that debris collected from a field in Roswell, which according to witnesses contained metallic and rubber debris, was reported by Roswell Army Airfield personnel as a, quote, flying disc. This was like a memo they released to the public, I guess. The announcement made international headlines due to the speculation around the flying saucers seen by pilot Kenneth Arnold, which that was like the first ever sighting of like a flying saucer, was Kenneth Arnold, who we talk about several times on different episodes. He was a pilot I think he was flying near Mount Rainier, and what he saw was, I think, 3 crescent-shaped aircraft that were moving in like a strange way that he said it was like if you were to throw a saucer over water or something. Like he was describing the motion as like a saucer-like motion where it was like a skipping stone. It was like it was flying in some impossible orientation. And so he said saucer, and so it became flying saucer. Then all of a sudden, people started seeing flying saucers, like saucer-shaped aircraft, but he didn't. He saw crescent-shaped aircraft that moved like a skipping, like a saucer, which is whatever. So with them saying flying disc, everyone went, oh my God, it's like a UFO. It's like a flying saucer, a flying disc. And then the Roswell thing got out of hand, and the next day they issued a retraction saying, no, it was actually a weather balloon. And so that was the first time people were like, that's suspicious. You know what I mean? Like, that was a suspicious thing they just did, because what if they don't want us to know what it really was? And that didn't set in at first, but like, I think a decade or two later, as that entered like pop culture, that was revisited, I think. And there was like books written about it, and it was kind of reframed as, I think it definitely was a UFO and the government lied to us. So you actually did a segment on the podcast in our Roswell episode about Project Mogul. I don't know if you remember that, but half a century later, we now know that the crash had occurred miles from Alamo Gordo Army Airfield, where the top secret Project Mogul was being carried out. And Project Mogul involved the creation and testing of thousands of military balloons fitted with this experimental detection equipment that was capable of listening for Soviet atomic tests. I don't know what the tech was, but basically you flew the balloons up to a certain altitude and you could pick up that whatever sound or frequency an atomic test would produce, and we would know, okay, the reds are up to no good. Mm-hmm. They're doing stuff right now, because we were too. But it was that's when the Cold War started. Right. Was when we were testing atomic bombs. So that was top secret. So it was, I think, a week or two. It was within the same month that prior to the Roswell crash, recovery, they lost a huge train of balloons, and they couldn't go looking for them necessarily because it was a top secret thing, and they couldn't say, "Hey, everyone, look out for balloons." And so researchers lost contact with these balloons. They couldn't recover them, and that's weeks later, a rancher discovered debris consisting of tinfoil, rubber, and wood, which is what the structure of these balloons were made out of, on his ranch. And they were scattered across his farmland. Authorities were called, the material collected, and seemingly inaccurate announcement was made by the airfield saying, a flying disc, whatever. And the next day they said, my bad, it's not a flying disc. So all that, the retraction, the rancher's mysterious testimony to a local newspaper, and a bunch of gossip would transform this into speculation. And in 1978, to make matters worse, a retired Air Force officer would revitalize the story with claims that the balloon story was indeed a cover-up and what had been a downed alien spacecraft. Mm-hmm. And I believe he put this in his I can't remember what it's called. It's a thing that can only be opened after your death or something.
Right.
It's some sort of testament thing. Yeah. Anyway, so it was after, on his deathbed, it was revealed that we saw, it was like a spacecraft, we saw bodies, we saw whatever. And we talk about more of that in our episode on Roswell. So anyways, let's get to the hearings. We have the background of why why America's so obsessed with aliens and UFOs. Mm-hmm. These hearings, I'm only going to cover the first main hearing because that had the most shocking material in it. But on July 26, 2023, not too long ago, we were both alive.
We were both alive.
We were alive somewhere. House lawmakers held a hearing to examine how the executive branch handles reports of unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UAPs.
I think it's time for this country to take back our country. We need to tell the folks at the Pentagon they work for us. Dadgummit, we don't work for them. And that's exactly the point. This is an issue of government transparency. We can't trust a government that does not trust its people. We're not bringing little green men or flying saucers into the hearing. Sorry to disappoint about half y'all. We're just going to get to the facts. We're going to uncover the cover-up, and I hope this is just the beginning of many more hearings and more people coming forward about this.
During the 2-hour hearing, the House Oversight's National Security Subcommittee heard from 3 witnesses. And these are the witnesses. Retired naval pilot Commander David Fravor, former U.S. Navy Lieutenant Ryan Graves, and a former senior intelligence officer with the National Geospatial Intel Agency, and former Air Force Major David Grush. Pretty legit guys. A bunch of nerds that devoted their lives to the military and government, whatever.
Hey.
So
they didn't join the military to be known as nerds. They're heroes.
God bless them. Thank you for your service, gentlemen.
Thanks, Neil.
Thanks, Neil. So some highlights from each of their opening statements and testimony. So I'll start with Graves. Just some quotes I pulled from his opening statement and testimony. Quote, UAP are in our airspace, but they are grossly underreported. These sightings are not rare or isolated. They are routine. And he goes on to say, the stigma attached to UAP is real and powerful and challenges national security. He later states that parts of our government are more aware about UAP than they let on. The excessive classification practices keep crucial information hidden. And since 2021, all UAP videos are classified as secret or above. This level of secrecy not only impedes our understanding, but fuels speculation and mistrust. Which, fair. Graves recounts a UAP encounter in 2014 when Graves was an active F-18 pilot in the Navy, stationed at NAS Oceana in Virginia Beach. So he explains that following advanced updates to their radar systems, his squadron began detecting UAPs operating in U.S. airspace. So they got better radar, and all of a sudden they were able to pick up on these things they hadn't seen before.
Okay.
They were confirmed through infrared systems and eventually visual ID as well. And during a training mission 10 miles off the coast of Virginia Beach, F-18 Super Hornets were split by a UAP described as a, quote, this is super weird, dark gray or black cube inside of a clear sphere. That's aliens.
Yeah.
That's abstract.
That's wild.
So, this UAP was estimated to be 5 to 15 feet in diameter. They weren't sure because they were like about 100 feet away, or 100 feet away. I think that's as close as they got, maybe 100 yards. Graves noted that despite a formal report given, no acknowledgement was given to the encounter. He added that after that encounter, UAP sightings became so frequent that aircrew discussed the risk of UAP as part of their regular pre-flight briefings.
That's wild.
So it's like every time they went for a flight and they were having a briefing, they discussed the possibility, like, look out for these crazy things that can, like,
split you
disorient
in half.
you and maybe, honestly, yeah, they could obliterate you and turn you into atoms. Graves went on to found the Americans for Safe Aerospace, an organization that provides a safe intake process for UAP sightings. They've since collected only 30 vetted UAP sightings with a growing team of nearly 5,000 members helping to collect those. Of the confirmed witnesses, Graves says that the majority are commercial pilots at major airlines with decades of flying experience.
That are making
And,
the
quote,
reports?
Yes. And, quote, pilots are reporting UAP at altitudes that appear to be above them at 40,000 feet, in low Earth orbit, or in the gray zone between the Kármán line, making inexplicable maneuvers, unquote. And in regards to airline pilots, Graves emphasized that they are likely countless other witnesses who fear making reports because of the social stigmas. Because when you think about it, if you're like pilots, for example, they have to retire fairly early because there's such a strict criteria on, like, are you healthy enough to fly? Do you have, like, the, whatever, like, are you with it? And so if you're saying, like, hey, I'm seeing flying saucers, they're going to be like, we don't want you in the air
grounded,
anymore. We can't trust you. Yeah, that's not safe to say. Yeah, so it's common that, like, you don't talk to traffic control about stuff. But, like, pilots allegedly share stories all the time.
I mean, that makes sense.
They just don't want to come public with it. Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, hell yeah. If I saw something, I'd be talking about it constantly. But you don't talk about it to the boss.
Yeah, have y'all seen anything weird in the skies lately?
Yeah. Which makes me want to talk to pilots now.
I know. Yeah.
Just like, hey, have you seen something? Graves' key concerns, and all the witnesses had the similar concerns, but his key concerns are UAP risks to civilian air traffic, understandably, general transparency between our government and military, and legitimate attention and support for UAP research from the government, which is, like, I guess, really non-existent. Moving on to David Grush. David Grush, I think, had one of the weirdest stuff to say. Grush became a whistleblower over his concerns with an observed secrecy with which esteemed military and intelligence community officials were operating in above congressional oversight with regards to UAP. In 2019, as a member of the official UAP task force, Grush's director tasked him to identify all special access and controlled access programs for an unspecified mission. It was during this time that Grush, quote, cleared was cleared to literally all relevant compartments and in a position of extreme trust in both his military and civilian capacities. So he basically just had all of access to way more than he'd ever had access to, which led him to highly confidential information on UFOs, basically. Okay. So what highly sensitive and confidential intel did this clearance lead him to find, you ask? In the carefully worded statement provided by David Grush, he says, quote, a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program.
Okay.
Which is kind of like what Bob Lazar was saying.
Right, yeah. And I didn't really talk about it, but the whistleblower mentions that too, that it's basically an arms race of who can reverse engineer these anti-gravity engines the fastest. And so far, China is winning.
Because you got to think, if they're crashing here, they're crashing
everywhere,
anywhere.
Yeah.
It's not just, it's not just the USA. So that's another reason why I think personally that it's not being talked about, is because it's not, of course, it's not being looked at as like a marvel of like, oh my God, look at what we can make. It's look at what we can weaponize, right? It's always going to be a weapon. It's never not going to be a fucking weapon. Right. So, and that was one thing that is, I remember a senator, congressman, again, I can't remember, when they came out of that initial closed door briefing, they had said, like, this will change warfare. And I think that was the same guy who went on to head this committee specifically, but he had made the comment of, like, which I thought was kind of cool. He was like, well, no wonder the war pigs don't want this to be talked about, because they're just trying to make money. He goes, like, this kind of technology will put every military contractor out of business. So, which is true. If you can make a something that's as faster than a bullet.
That's wild.
So, yeah. So, Grush said there were limits to his clearance, as extensive reports on these retrievals and engineering still remain inaccessible. Shocked at the apparent existence of real UAP technology in the hands of the U.S. military, Grush decided to reveal these classified findings to his superiors, who he felt should be made aware, as well as several inspectors general. And inspectors general are basically just every department of the government, both federal and at a state level, local level, have what's like an office of inspector general, which is just people, special agents who are constantly like doing audits and like investigating like claims of like fraud, abuse, mismanagement, stuff like that. So I don't know which ones he went to, probably for the Air Force or something, but he made them aware, saying, hey, I bet you don't know about this, because nobody knows about this, but they're hiding this crazy information that somebody besides a select tier of people in the military should know about. So yeah, Grush reported to the inspectors general because he felt that the secrecy was consequential to national security and also just unethical.
Our boy.
Yeah. Grush also revealed to the subcommittee that he had been told from several highly trusted sources that the U.S. government possesses, quote, non-human biological matter recovered from the recovered UAPs. And he couldn't, I watched the hearing, he couldn't elaborate. He's just like, I can't say anything else. I can say in private if you want to talk, but I can't tell you what it is. I just know that it is literally non-human biological matter.
You've stated that the government is in possession of potentially non-human spacecraft. Based on your experience and extensive conversations with experts, do you believe our government has made contact with intelligent extraterrestrials?
Something I can't discuss in public setting.
Okay, I can't ask when you think this occurred. If you believe we have crashed craft, stated earlier, do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
As I've stated publicly already in my News Nation interview, biologics came with some of these recoveries, yeah.
Were they, I guess, human or non-human biologics?
Non-human, and that was the assessment of people with direct knowledge on the program I talked to that are currently still on the program.
And was this documentary evidence, this video, photos, eyewitness? Like, how would that be determined?
The specific documentation I would have to talk to you in a skiff about.
And grain of salt, I mean, he is technically getting all this from other sources. But again, this is, I would imagine, trustworthy people who, were his superiors or people who he reported to.
That's wild.
If it's legitimate, it's really disturbing. I really liked this part from his clothing statement. I think this is like such a universal statement. He says, quote, "It is my hope that the revelations we unearth through investigations of the non-human reverse engineering programs I have reported will act as an earth-shattering shock, a catalyst for global reassessment of our priorities." Which that's what it's all about, right? It's like there's so much more. We got to stop fighting each other because there's a whole other ball game happening outside of our ball game, and we're wasting time, fighting religious wars and annexing countries and bombing the shit out of people. Money should be going to this, not to that, right?
One can fucking hope.
Yeah. So I think my stance is like what you had mentioned is I think there's either it's alien technology or it's foreign technology that we also don't want to talk about, because if we're saying, hey, by the way, we found this drone got shot down over Dakota, and we think it's from one of the Dakotas, and we think it's from
it's
China,
from
maybe,
Canada.
It's from Canada. A real sleeper cell, that Canada.
Canada's fucking pissed at the U.S. right now.
Dude, Trump keeps on calling Trudeau Governor Trudeau. He's not with a smirk. I just saw a clip today of him being at a briefing, or a press briefing. He was like, "Well, I told Governor Trudeau that he needs to whatever," and it's like, dude. And I want to put it here first. I think. So he does this thing where, not just him, it's his administration, the people behind him, the real power players. They do what they call flooding the zone, which they say a bunch of crazy shit that the media soaks up and wastes all its time focusing on while they get stuff done. Not necessarily good stuff, but whatever. That being said, I feel like he is trying to do the whole was it frog in the boiling water thing, where if you boil a frog long enough, they won't jump out of the boiling water. If you start from nothing, the heat gets more and more. I think we could be annexing Canada within the next 4 years.
I agree.
Because he wants minerals. He wants resources. Same reason why he wants to take Greenland. Is he wants these resources, natural resources. And he's not joking. And I don't know how to it's crazy to people. I work with someone who's Canadian, and I can tell they don't totally get the full grasp of this. He's not
joking.
A joke.
He's not joking.
Trump is funny. I'll give him that. Trump has I guess he can be funny sometimes, but he's starting as a joke to make everyone comfortable with him saying that, and then someday he's going to be like, hey, we're going to occupy a province or something. We're just going to, I don't know how they'll frame it, but we're entering a weird time. And I'm not saying it's oh my God, end of the world, but you think UFOs are weird? It's going to get weirder than that. Because it'll touch your individual life. It'll be
Yeah. So I'm holding out. I'm holding out for the aliens to come and rescue us.
Yeah, I don't know.
Anyways.
I don't know. Maybe we're the aliens.
So the takeaways that I've gotten are that we have these seemingly legitimate officials disclosing that there are unidentified objects, and there are non-human biological matter, and essentially all of these little hints that aliens are real, but they're not saying it outright.
Pretty much. They're saying what they're saying is, hey, this is what I've seen. Or in Gresh's case, it's like, this is what I've read. These are the, like, if these are, I don't know if these are fake. What the fuck is this? Bug. It's like, this is what I've read, assuming this isn't, like, fake, which, why is it fake? You know, like, assuming this isn't, like, propaganda or, like, you know, some sort of other kind of smokescreen thing that's for some reason in this database. This is real. This is, like, no one's talking about this. Why is no one talking about this? Even internally, not just to the public, but, like, inside the military, they're not talking about this. They're deliberately not investigating this. Why?
Yeah.
Aren't they investigating it? And is it because there is a secret committee that is investigating it? And if so, why aren't they transparent, not to the government, not to the people, but to the rest of the military? That's what they're all confused about. It's like, this is the most insane thing we've ever seen in our careers. Why is no one, especially for the case of Graves and Fravor, and I'll close with Fravor's account, his statement, but it's like, if this is real, why are we not putting money into that? Why are we not looking into this? Because it's something that, like the guy said, is happening almost every day.
Right.
Where, like, pilots are talking about it in their daily pre-flight briefings.
Okay, so here's my theory, right? Like, if this is happening and seemingly no one's doing anything about it, that's not something that the government, I think, would be okay with just not knowing, right? If there are unidentified objects operating at a technology that they are not at yet, that poses a huge risk, right? Especially if it's seen around areas that are highly sensitive, like military bases and emergency communication centers. That's not something the government is, like, okay not knowing. So if they're not investigating it, it's because they already know. They just haven't communicated that to these branches of the government because it's so high level, which like, I think means if it's something so high level, they feel like they can't disseminate that information. It's because it is something crazy, like aliens, or they've made some huge breakthroughs in technology. But in that case, why are there so many reports of, like, these whistleblower stories, whatever, of them trying to reverse engineer and they're failing?
Yeah.
So dramatically, you know?
Because sometimes it's like, not no news is good news, but, like, it's one thing to say, hey, we have this stuff and we're working on it. We're working on re-engineering it. It's another thing to say, hey, we found this stuff and we're nowhere close to understanding how to re-engineer this. We might not even be capable of re-engineering this. It might be so ahead of us. Because that is not good PR.
Right.
That doesn't give people confidence in your abilities. So, you know, that's just wild shit.
Yeah.
Bizarre. It's bizarre because it's real, right?
Yeah.
It's bizarre because it's like government boring stuff. It's not just like, oh my God, we saw aliens and they're walking around giving handshakes. It's like I've said boring before, but these military heroes, these guys that, like, their job is to be smart and to be attentive and to follow the rules. And they're out here saying, hey, I just saw something that disagrees with everything I understand. And no one wants to talk to me about it. And I was told to not talk about it. And why was I told that? Because that seems like it's against our own interest.
Right.
So I'll close with David Fravor's testimony, which is also interesting and more technical. Fravor recounted a 2004, so a while back now, encounter. I believe 2004. I believe I was a child, and I think that was the year we went to Universal Studios.
Important.
So
important. Bookmark that.
Coincidence? I think coincidence. That's kind of a strange coincidence. What's going on here? In 2004 encounter with a UAP off the coast of San Diego. So I would have been on the other coast. I would have been in Florida. So I had nothing to do with this. So I'm clear. This incident earned the popular nickname of the Tic Tac incident.
Okay.
which during the hearing, an old congressman said, "TikTok incident," and I saw David Fravor smile.
Mr. Fravor has his own UAP experience known as the TikTok event.
Like this old fuck.
Whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude. That's not our LNS though, is it? It's not. That is the LNS, dude. Well, if there's like... Look at that thing. It's rotating. Nickel 6-1 Tango Logic. Hey, got it! Woohoo! Roger, there's troubleshooting. Did you box moving target? No, I took an auto track. Oh, okay. Oh my gosh, dude. Wow, look at it fly!
Fravor described a, quote, white, oblong object that demonstrated unprecedented flight characteristics, like rapid acceleration and sudden directional changes. Fravor told Congress, quote, "These objects had been observed for over 2 weeks, coming down from over 80,000 feet, rapidly descending to 20,000 feet, hanging out for hours, and then going straight back up. For those who don't realize, above 80,000 feet is space." Later adding, quote, "All four of us looked down and saw a white tic-tac object with a longitudinal axis pointing north-south and moving very abruptly over the water like a ping-pong ball. There were no rotors, no rotor wash, which is like the air beneath like a helicopter pilot, rotor, and or any sign of visible control surfaces like wings. So it didn't have blades, didn't have wings. There was no exhaust. There was no clear direction to it. Fravor and the other pilots would continue to track and approach the Tic Tac, only for it to evade them at impossible speeds. And when they began their return to the USS Nimitz, which is where they were stationed at, the controller contacted them, saying, quote, "Sir, you are not going to believe this, but that thing is at your CAP point, roughly 60 miles away in less than a minute."
Wow.
For context, currently our fastest fighter jet in service is the F-15 Eagle, I believe. This is what I found on Google. Could be outdated. And the F-15 Eagle has a top speed of Mach 2.5, which is roughly 1,918 miles per hour.
Okay.
So the Tic Tac had approximately traveled at an observed 3,600 miles per hour.
So 3 times.
Yeah, so, So
Damn.
that's insane.
Which is interesting
That's
because...
faster than any military aircraft we
Yeah,
have.
3 times faster.
By 3, yeah.
Because the Tic Tac shape is synonymous with some of the reports that I was mentioning with the drones.
Yeah.
And the bright light.
That's a shape that's been... We've seen that shape come up in reports, within the last few decades. So it's a common shape associated with...
UAPs.
In his testimony, David Fravor expressed that his primary concern and reason for publicly coming forward was the lack of attention the report on the Tic Tac received. When Fravor and his men returned to the Nimitz, they spoke with other They spoke with other pilots privately about their encounter. Quote, "We were talking to one of my crews who was getting ready to launch. We mentioned it to him, and they went out and luckily got the video that you see. But in the video, you see the Tic Tac object doing crazy shit, and the pilot's freaking out." While the 90-second clip has been made public, Fravor notes, quote, "What you do not see is the radar tape that was never released, and we do not know where it is at. Of the act of jamming that object put on an APG-73 radar." So not only was it evading them and doing impossible maneuvers, it scrambled this like brand new radar that we have that was like, ideally you make radar that can't be scrambled by known
That's wild.
technology. So in total, this vehicle demonstrated extraordinary maneuvers and impossible speeds, and scrambled cutting-edge radar tracking. Yet, for some reason, the military and government saw no reason to acknowledge or credit this incident.
Or to investigate
Which,
it.
like you... Yeah, which, as you said before, they probably did, just at a totally different level that no one had access to. So, this, Fravor would agree, is not only concerning from a national security standpoint. The lack of transparency and communication with professionals such as Fravor and his squadron paints a picture of a secretive and elusive government. Collectively, these stories provided by the three whistleblowers touch on the same troubling topics, which is government oversight, a lack of transparency or legitimacy regarding UAPs, and a betrayal of public trust, and even trust within the military and government. And so, also a risk to national security.
Right.
Yeah.
Apparently no one knows what these things are.
Yeah. So there's more. I encourage anyone to go watch through some of these hearings or some of the highlight reels of them. And if you want to hear more about Fravor, I hate to say listen to Joe Rogan, but Joe Rogan has an interview with him from before Joe Rogan became
who he is now.
Whatever happened to that guy. And that was a pretty good episode. He talks pretty candidly about, his experience, his history in the military and how crazy that stuff was. And he made a point. He's like, I held on to that story for decades. And every Thanksgiving I was at, a relative would ask me, "You ever seen a UFO?" And I had to say no. He goes, and I can finally talk to people about it. That's the worst. And it's like, that is the worst part of that. It's like these people that know, you can't tell anybody.
Yeah.
And what fun is that? It's like the most what would be, especially these guys on the inner inside that like have this secret knowledge of what these crash retrievals are. Like, you have the most insane knowledge, potentially in human history regarding technology, and you can't tell anybody.
Because they probably bugged their house and, everything they own so that they don't slip up.
I'm sure there's a sacrifice to get in that inner sanctum. You have to give up a lot.
Yeah.
You have to really be owned by your job. You have to be like, I will. Only the true Boy Scouts, I'm sure, get that information. People they have leverage against that can't talk out about it. But also, we have moles in our government. We know we've always had, we've had moles in our government forever. So there's got to be someone in that inner sanctum that's leaking it to other countries, because other countries apparently have known about this too. But yeah,
it's crazy.
So that's UAPs, that's drones, that's what's going on in America.
That's what we've learned in the last couple of years.
Wasn't this crazy how this was two parts? Wasn't it kind of fun? A little narrative strung across several weeks. Oh my God,
I did my clothes and hair exactly the same way.
Isn't that weird that we did that?
Wow, it's cute. It's
cute
of us.
We made an agreement to do that. Yeah.
Thanks for sticking along for the second part. Let's do a good vibes to end off this UAP two-parter story. Since it is technically a full-length episode here. Do you want me to go first?
You do first. I gotta think of something.
My good vibes is that I'm looking to buy a house. So that's exciting.
That's exciting. That's a fun prospect.
It's a fun prospect for sure. I might own a physical building.
That's weird to put it that way, but yeah. That's pretty cool.
Go me. We'll see. I'll let you know when the summer comes around.
Go Mo. My good vibe is, it's gotta be my engagement. Woo! I am now happily engaged to the love of my life. It's a great time. Good time for all.
Yeah, that's right. Is it?
For all you lovers out there, it's a good time.
Right in time for Valentine's Day. How about that?
Yeah, that's right.
How
Isn't
about
that crazy? By the way, we recorded this just after Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
So that's why
we're aging ourselves. Thank you.
We're aging ourselves, yeah. All right,
anyways,
folks.
Thank you for listening. As always, if you want to stay up to date with our new episodes, when they come out, all of this fun, stupid shit that we do, follow us on social media on Instagram and Facebook at According to an Idiot and Twitter at IdiotsAccord. You can also send us an email if there's a topic you want us to talk about. You can do that if you want to just give us like a hey, good job. That's cool too. At accordingtoanidiot@gmail.com. We also have a Patreon. We have ad-free listening, early access to episodes, an exclusive creepypasta series that you can watch, because we have video, and listen to. Jeremy also has a Mothman series where he will be reading the Mothman Prophecy, right? Mothman Prophecy.
The Mothman Prophecies by John Keel.
Straight to your ears. How about that?
Right in your ears.
We are going to be regularly releasing these episodes on a bi-weekly basis. We have a video editor now, so we are going to be releasing videos. So now's the best time to jump on that Patreon. If you want other people to find us, be sure to rate us on all the things. iTunes, Spotify, your friends.
You can leave comments on Spotify now.
And on YouTube.
Isn't that weird?
That was weird.
Isn't that a stupid feature? But you can do it, and you should do it.
You should do it. For us.
For our podcast.
Anyways, I think that's all I wanted to say.
And that was a good thing to say.
Thank you.
Well put.
Thank you so much. I try my best.
All right, guys. Well, thank you for listening. Watch the skies, and I will see you in time.
Love ya.